Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as you've seen what's going on on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today. Relaxing as per usual, post D&D session. Interesting session today, actually. It's a rather low-key one, I think. If anything, it's one I feel like I can actually talk more about because there wasn't any particularly crazy plot reveals, I think, in this one. Or there weren't really much to be honest. It was more like a low-key, it was like a transitionary one, which was a good session to have after the absolute intensity of the previous two sessions, to be honest, previous 3 sessions. But good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 9:59 p.m. on Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. I talked about it before, about how one of my players probably did a massive mistake. It still is, genuinely, a pretty big mistake, but at least now, I would say after this session, it's been band-aid fixed a little bit. The long and short of it is this friend has essentially like a secret patron, kind of, which is like a source of magic because the dragon, I don't know, it's a long story short. They ended up bringing in someone into the same care, the same patron from an organization which they do not trust, essentially. Why do they do it? Can we just say, you know, but love is a powerful thing in so many ways. But yes, so that happened, and I talked about it last night. I can't remember what the episode was called Animal Crossing, but I was like, I gave them so many apps to be like, are you sure you want to do this, essentially? And you know, he kept pushing through, and then basically the last half of the session was basically like, you messed up. Let's try and figure out how badly you messed up. And to be honest, I'll be completely real with you, it's still pretty bad, because one of the biggest things about it is the existence of it in the first place, and the possibility being open. It's sort of like telling your opponent the possibility that there exists a way to defeat you, and it's something to do with this, essentially. And then being like, oh, but we haven't told you exactly how to do it, so you're doomed. But it's like, well, yeah, but now now that they know there is a possibility, there's like a motivation there to actually look for it in the first place, right? It's sort of like, you know, I haven't been like, oh, there's like £1 million somewhere in my house, but it's like, it's fine, it's perfectly safe because, you know, I haven't told you where my house is. Well, yeah, but people are still gonna try and like ransack your house trying to find it, right? Anyway, that's the overall vibe. But the interesting thing about this patron is meant to be like a very, very nice warlock patron, essentially. So, and when I was planning it out, when I was thinking about how it would work, I'd be like, I think it would make sense or be an interesting twist if it was like sort of reversed from a regular warlock patron, because usually it's the warlock who's sort of like indebted to the patron in the first place and is forced in the contract, and you know, only the patron has total control over the contract. And what happens in it, like they are the ultimate power. And I was like, well, it'd be really interesting because story-wise, you know, this patron is like the adoptive daughter, I suppose, of this character, this player. It'd be interesting if we reversed that dynamic, and now it's the patron is not the one is in control of like the boons and the gifts and everything, but they're not the ones necessarily in control of the contract. So when I planned it out, I was like, it'll be reversed this way, like instead of it being like the patron can break the contract when they want, but the warlock cannot. The warlock has to do what the contract says, essentially. This time it's sort of reversed, where it's like the patron, it's not like has to do what the contract says, but the warlock can step out of a contract at any time, can break it for whatever reason, but the patron cannot force him out of a contract. And, you know, silly me, and I suppose when I was crafting it up, being like, this seems like a very interesting idea, and I think it's very befitting of a character to basically want to give the option, like make it be like a voluntarily opted in thing. But then my players surprised me because they were just like, I have a plan for how to salvage this really bad situation. I was like, okay. And they essentially casted suggestion, and they were like, I suggest that you leave the contract. And I went, oh, that's very interesting. I did not, like, this is probably why contracts aren't this way round in real life, because I was like, that's very interesting, because yeah, like if it works, like I check suggestion, like the person doesn't know if it succeeds. Well, if it succeeds, the person doesn't know that they were suggested to. They can, from the intuition I get from it, is that they can maybe figure out something happened, but also yeah, I'm just trying to think what else. Yeah, the patron can, sorry, but like when it runs out, it's not like they're immediately aware of it, just like charm person and friends are. And I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. It is 4th level, to be honest. And from that, I was basically just sort of like reading it and just being like, how would this make sense? I'm like, would someone willingly leave a beneficial contract for them? And then I was like reading the words and was like, okay, they just won't do things which seem to be like directly harmful or unreasonable. And I was like, I guess it doesn't seem unreasonable to just like, you know, I guess the equivalent would be like, if we were to take a modern spin on it, it'd be like, I want you to like quit your job or something. It's not going to put you in direct harm's way, and like if mind control I suppose existed in real life, it's not like that would be particularly disastrous, I suppose. Well, okay, depending on the situation, obviously it'd be bad, but I mean the example they give is like, give your horse to the next peasant you see, which obviously could be a very bad thing, because it could leave you stranded or whatever, and it's giving away maybe one of the best of your possessions or whatever. But seeing like that would work, and I'm like, okay, I guess that seems reasonable, right? But the thing I was most surprised about was like the absolute bravado to do that, because if it fails, they're just sort of like doubling down on the worst idea ever. Well, it ended up succeeding, because behind the scenes, the person rolled a 2, and I was like, okay, fine, this might as well happen. But of course, it's not free from consequences. It's not like that person is dumb. They're probably going to figure out, shall we say, or at least have some sort of idea that something happened. The crazy part as well is that it actually could have been almost a seamless plan, if the player actually discussed it with the other 2 party members. Because one of the other party members has an item which I gave him ages ago, which allows them to sort of like basically modify memory over the last like few seconds. So basically that combined with the suggestion working could allow them to basically sort of forget the initial circumstance of like them casting a spell and then not being aware of what happened. And that's what I was really, really worried about when I heard the suggestion, and I was thinking, running through my head, I was like, oh, this seems like a bad idea, actually, this could be quite scary. Because there were discussions about it happening before, and discussions were like, they'd be able to figure it out. And the answer is, yeah, they probably would, but then while that was happening, I was like, oh, that could be a very dangerous thing, but luckily this player did not tell the other party members. Lucky for the DM, so I can still use that as a consequence, as a plot hook. You're not getting off scot-free this time. It is probably the first time I feel like, oh, you know, this is me and my world building for something which I thought was inconsequential actually ended up mattering. Being like, oh yeah, it'd be a benevolent patron, the contracts will be benevolent. Oh, well, turns out they can be taken advantage of. But, you know, fair enough. And if anything, I think this is the right balance now, where it's like the immediate threat doesn't feel suffocating, but there is a looming threat, which can still sort of come from all of this. Which I think is probably the nicest balance in the end. But, you know, D&D is full of weird, wacky and wonderful things in the end, so who knows. Anywho. What are we going to talk about today? I know we spent a lot of time talking about that. A D&D sort of thing, but yeah, I'm not sure. What should we chat about? New Honko Star Rail patch came out. I got insanely lucky with my pulls. Like, so lucky that I did my first pull, it like turned into a 5-star, and I was like, huh, I thought I was on 0 pity. I was on 0 pity. Is probably all I'll say about that before moving on. And what else? I haven't really checked out much of a new patch, to be honest. It's the anniversary patch, which is interesting. And anniversaries I always think are fun times in catch games because big stuff ends up happening. But what should we talk about? I'm not really sure. Conversationally, what's like a short conversation I can end up having, which is vaguely related? Contracts is a bit of a hard one to really talk about. It's like the fine detail, I suppose, of things. If anything, it's more of like an interlocking system. It's sort of like a world building coming together and small consequences, which I'm very happy that my players are able to take advantage of. Because I mean, there's a lot of things in the actual world which don't make sense. It's not like everything I have is built cohesively down to scale. You know, I have finite time. I don't spend all my life world building, at least not the D&D world. I spend enough time sort of world building enough to give a structure that a story can take place in which my friends will be engaged with, and that's basically the long and short of it. So, you know, peek behind the curtain, a lot of things I don't know the specific details of. I only know the broad strokes of what things are, and you know, sometimes you'd be like, this would be like an interesting idea for like a fantasy world, because you're like, oh, this would be unusual. It's not how things work in real life. It's a little bit strange. Why not do something like this just to sort of see how things go? Why not do something like this and we'll see what comes of it? And obviously, because I'm not a world building expert, obviously because I'm, you know, for example, like I'm not like the world's best economist or anything like that, so me inventing like a fictional economy system is bound to have flaws, and it's interesting to see them sort of be not picked apart per se, but you know, used to their advantage, I think, from a player's perspective. I know a lot of the time we're not going to sit there and be like, I'm going to try and take advantage of literally everything which happens, because that would be a little bit too much. You know, obviously we've sort of done like a invisible social handshake to be like, okay, obviously I can't think of every single consequence that's going to happen. We'll just, you know, both play in a way which is fair to each other. We're not trying to like get one over on each other or anything like that. We're both trying to have just a fun, engaging experience. So things change, things shift, you know. Obviously things which they could take advantage of, they don't necessarily, because they're just like, why not? One big thing which did happen, which I was the benevolent DM in this case, and thought I'd remind them of, is basically because they're silver rank adventurers. Essentially, one of the things I mentioned early on was like all the deals you get, all the benefits and boons you get for being silver rank adventurers, and one of them was the fact that you get half off all the transportation systems in this kingdom, and that was meant to be the general idea of it. Is the fact that this kingdom is the capitalist, like, I don't know, epitome of everything in here. But the transportation systems are quite expensive. But a lot of the times the transportation systems are either subsidised by, if you're like a decent rank adventurer, then they're free for you because they're ones who would use up the most. Or if you're a business person, they'll be subsidised by the business. But not really, this sort of transportation system is not meant to be for your average person. It's meant to be cost prohibitive, which is why it's so expensive. But then, like, as you get like adventurer ranks, it gets cheaper. Or if you join a business, then the business will like front the cost or something, or work out a deal essentially for what's going on. But in an earlier session, like 3 months ago, they ended up taking one of the taxi service essentially. And I made a note that like they did not mention or bring up the fact they had a discount at all. So I was like, all right, you're not going to get a discount unless you bring it up. But then like they were going to do it again, and then they were like, wait a minute, this is like so cost prohibitive. And then I was like, okay, at this point, you know, I'll step in as a benevolent DM and be like, I'm going to remind you of this information which you probably forgot, seeing as it'll be the second time you did it, and I think it would be reasonable that your characters might remember this. And it was a very, very funny reaction when I was like, I'm not sure if you remember this, but you have 50% off all the transportation systems of being silver rank. And it was just like, oh, yeah, we do. Not that gold actually matters too much, I'll be honest, in my campaign compared to, I'm sure, a lot of other campaigns. It's half and half, like my players don't want to buy anything particularly crazy. And also, I'm not sure what to do with gold in this sort of campaign. Like, I'd have to create a load of different items, but I'm like, why would I create a load of generic items when I could give them like interesting items related to the plot of a story, or something that we've done about synergizing of them. And then if they want to have like other sort of low magic items, then they can use that money to buy it, or use it to sway people or something, etc, etc. It's a resource, but it's not a resource that I want to sort of prohibit character growth with, is perhaps the best way to put it. Anyway, so yeah, world building can be quite difficult to get every little detail right, and in this case, making a patron who has very benevolent contracts, sometimes it doesn't go the way you exactly plan for it to go. But I think like being able to spot these little details, this little arbitrage, I think is part of it, is the joy of it in the first place, to be able to be like, oh look, this is something which is actually swayed to our benefit because of this. And I think the initial reaction, I think probably every DM has, is, gosh darn it, why didn't I think about it? And then it's sort of like, oh, you know what, I've got respect for it, because that was a very sort of impressive way to work around an obstacle I thought of. Because it has happened multiple times, I'm sure. Not that I could, you know, no, probably go on forever if I list out every single time it happened. Because, I mean, as a DM, you get to have a lot of them. Just being like, hey, you probably forgot about this, or, you know, here's a big reveal, and everyone goes, what? So when the players get one over, well, not get one over, I think that's a bit much, but when players do something clever like that, I think it's only fair and befitting, isn't it? Anyway, on that note, I think I'll round this episode off here. I know it's a bit of a shorter one, but my friends want to play Rabbit and Steal, and so do I. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now. Where's my mouse gone? Oh, it's over here.